This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com. The only place to be in your pop culture world.
Come on, come on. We call it the place to be. The place to be, yes. It's the place to be. Then I shall be.
Place to Be Nation, Scott Criscola and Justin Rosero. This is the Place to Be Podcast.
It is contagious. It is the place to be, and we are live each and every Monday.
To do worse than Josh Richard.
Grow chicks to my Hollywood shows, and I want to tell you something that you probably should know. This that Slumdog Millionaire Bollywood flow, and my real friends never hearing from me. Fake friends write the wrong answers on the mirror for me. That's why I pick and choose. I don't get shit confused. I got a small circle. I'm not with different crews. We walk the same path, but got on different shoes.
Place to Be Nation, welcome to a great episode of the one and only Place to Be Podcast. I am your host, Justin Rosero, with you live here on this Monday evening inside the PTBN studios. And joining me, as always, for a little look back at the vintage vault that is my POC, Scott Criscola. Scott, how are you?
Good evening, JR. Good evening, Place to Be Nation. Welcome to episode 488 of the longest-running episodic motherfucking gold standard. 12 episodes away from 5 bills, which means sometime in... I think we're going to get close to the end of 2019. I don't know if we'll get to 2020. Maybe the end of 2019. We'll see. Anyway, JR, pleasure as always.
Yeah, I think so. Yep, it is.
Yeah, as always. Weather's nice. Basketball, you're settling in now, huh? You're not playing in the wind and the cold. Seems your weekly games are getting better.
Yeah, and last week was well. It's funny because usually we have the ramp up. Well, last week we were playing in the freezing weather, and then last week it was like 90 out. So it was, but this week looks to be about 70. We're actually getting Mr. D'Amato out on the court for his season debut, so should be a fun time. I'm gonna have him coming into play. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to tonight too. This is a big show. One actually covered fairly recently with Jeff on Jeff Learns Wrestling, but we'll touch on it again here with a bit of a different perspective.
Yes.
And as always, Scott, we do have a third man with us tonight. But
yes, we do.
It is not Peter Winston. It is not Kelly Nelson. It's not Pete Schermarker. It's not John D'Amato. It is a person making his, I guess, proper Place to Be podcast debut. He's been on some specials, and he does some trivia. You may know him as the co-host of the Hard Traveling Fanboys. You may know him as the Cat's Meow, like I do. And that is the one and only Mr. Dick Nuke. Nick, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, guys. How are you guys doing this evening?
Oh, doing great.
Excellent. Always good. Dick Nuke. So is that the name he leaves in the hotels or the bed and breakfasts? Yeah, Dick Nuke.
He left a little Dick Nuke all over NOLA, baby.
I don't know about all that.
Did you leave it? You left a Dick Nuke in Claire's room when you were going for your shop bag?
I left a lot of stuff in Claire's room, apparently, including my heart and soul, so... You know.
My favorite part, too, is that the night I stayed there, the next morning I looked at that bag and I said, I should take this for Nick. But I'm like, you know what? Then I'm going to be stuck with it. And I don't want to carry it around. So we'll get it eventually. And then it ended up being a fiasco.
I'm afraid I'm going to be wondering for the rest of my life what became of that bag because it is long gone at this point.
So you never got it?
No, I got it. And then I lost it again.
No, jeez.
On the like 2-block walk from the
So even the merch that was in it? Even the merch that was in it's gone? Oh.
Well, the merch wasn't nearly as big a deal as like the keys. My keys were in the bag as well. So like, I had one of those like 2-part keys, you know, that pops off, so I can crank my car and everything. But like my house key, my the key to my parents' place, like all my keys were on that key ring, and they are long gone at this point. So, one of my drunken escapades cost me once again.
By the way, of course, we should plug right now. You did a recent Talk and Pop episode with Jennifer and Tim. And you recapped the weekend, which
as best I could, anyway.
It was a great listen. As Scott will tell you, there's some holes he's obsessed with, but
right.
Not you, Nick. Not you. Not you.
I would hope that you're not. I would hope that you're not obsessed with my holes, but that's another topic for another time, sir.
Isn't that what the new show? No, never mind.
Anyway, there was a story on that podcast, Nicholas,
yes,
that you didn't pay off. Did you want to save that for Talk and Pop, or did you want to do a little Easter egg here?
Yeah. I forgot to pay that story off. So, yeah, the story about getting, like, not even trapped isn't the right word, but stumbling into this construction site and then having to climb a fence to get out. The payoff to that story is, like, probably about a good solid 2 hours into WrestleMania. I just happened to glance down at my shirt, and it's almost like perfectly torn at the right nipple, and my right nipple is literally just poking out through like this little flap. and it's just the flap is just kind of like fluttering there in the wind. It was ultra bizarre, and it took me forever to notice it. So I'm assuming that in the act of climbing the fence, it got caught on one of the little spokes on the chain link and ripped on the way down. But that's the only thing I can think. It was certainly a unique situation, to say the least.
It was quite unique, but I did enjoy seeing your exposed nipple for all of Sunday night. Because the best part is, not only was your nip out at WrestleMania, it was in the freezing rain walk back to Bourbon Street for a couple more hours at the Cat's Meow. Yep. Your nipple was exposed when we went to that other bar where Claire had the giant Corona. Your nipple was exposed in the car ride as we escorted Graham Cawthon around New Orleans.
Yes, also true. Yeah. So my nipple and my stained Zubas were just all hanging out there in New Orleans on that final night. So I'm sure I looked like quite a sight at that point and felt like one as well.
So you looked like Hawk on a night out in like 1992.
Pretty much, yeah.
Stained Zubas, exposed nipples.
Bald head.
Exposed nipples, yeah.
Bald head,
illicit substances, all coursing throughout my veins. It was quite the night.
That's what happens when you spend a weekend with Todd Weber in one house. That's it all falls apart.
It's what happens when you hang out with any of the West Coast contingent of Place to Be Nation. When you get Todd Weber and Mark Claire in the same city, for an extended period of time, shit just goes south real fast.
When you fly Air Claire, things go wonky right away.
There you go. Those in-flight Cheetos, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I hear you. All right, so here we are, Nick. So the reason we asked you on was, A, you bitched at me at lunch in New Orleans that you had never been on, and I made a mental note above everything else that was going on that weekend. So I made sure I noted that in my head, and I said we're going to have Nick on soon. And
well,
Scott,
I would not have said anything if Greg had not been on, and you know that I have to have my own little. I'm sure you guys know how it goes. Your own little personal competitions that you have. So
sure.
That was the only thing. It was the fact that Greg had been on before for something.
You're right. He's been on a few times. I think he did a year. I don't think he's ever done a vintage vault though. So you haven't beaten.
I don't think so either. No.
If I remember correctly, the last time he was on, it was when we had launched, or you guys had launched the website. And you were doing recurring, I think, like Meet the Staff features or something like that. And so he came on and did some stuff with you then.
Yeah, I think he did like a year in review one time too with Nate. Mm-hmm. I think they did like one of 14 or 15 or something like that.
Gotcha.
So anyway, he's never done Vintage Vault, Nick, so you beat him. And
there you go.
Beat him to that.
One of the reasons we had you on, and Scott can attest to, is Nick here is a mammoth, gargantuan Hulk Hogan fan. Mm-hmm. And this is quite the night for Hulkamania, Nick.
Yeah. This was, it's especially interesting for me because, like, I kind of had a different perspective than you guys did because I kind of came to this after the fact. Like, my first wrestling show I ever saw in my life was WrestleMania 3, and then I had to like go back and catch up on stuff through Coliseum videos and what little I could find that people had recorded off of VHS and stuff. And then this, I think I actually saw WrestleMania 4 first, and then my uncle had this recorded off of VHS, and then he let me watch. And like, so I kind of had to, piece together what all had happened and why Hogan didn't have the title and all that. Because I was only, by the time I saw this, I think I was like 4. So I would have been 4 in like 1992, probably by the point I saw this, and was trying to get caught
up. Which Roosevelt? No. But yeah, well, history doesn't even begin to explain this evening in Indianapolis. So
this is nuts, man. This is it had a huge impact on me the first time I saw it when I was a kid, and then watching it again in preparation for this, it took me back for sure. This was a lot of fun to watch, I gotta say.
Well, I wanted
you were 4 in 1992. Is that what you said?
Yeah. So I'm December birthday, so I turned 4 in December of '91, and then by the time I saw this, I'm pretty sure it would have been like early '92 when I watched this.
Even I feel old now. I was 10.
Yep.
I was. Never mind. Wait, December 91?
You just became eligible to be president.
18. There you go. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Nick, so actually, just take a minute because you are like right after the guy with the Hogan tattoo on his back. You're probably next.
I don't know. Glenn Butler's up there as well. So that's a
yeah. Glenny Bun is pretty high.
Yeah, Glenn's also a big Uncle Elmer fan, as we have been exhibited on Facebook here today.
Yes.
Of a cosplaying his favorite hillbilly troop. All right, so Nicholas, tell us though real quick your origin Hulk Hogan, so like how you became this Hulk Hogan mega fan, a top 5 all-time Hogan fan of everyone.
So like, first of all, my aunt and uncle used to own the little mom and pop video store there in small town Alabama back when those were still things. And so literally we got free rentals every day of my life for like the first 6 years I was alive. And after a while, you run through everything else and you just are looking for stuff to watch. And I just wandered over to like, the sports and special interest section or whatever and just started grabbing this stuff and was kind of captivated the first time. Like I said, WrestleMania 3 was the first wrestling show I ever saw. And I was always a big, fan of wrestling in general and of Hulk Hogan. But then when I was 4, I was in a go-kart accident. I was in a pretty serious go-kart accident that I wound up being hospitalized for 3 months, had 7 reconstructive surgeries on my stomach. Was there at Children's Hospital in Birmingham that entire time. And it was one of those situations where my parents obviously, were in a tough spot because my mom had to be there with me all the time. And my dad at the time was working graveyard shift at the post office down in Dothan, Alabama. And so I don't remember a whole lot from those hospital stays. But one of the few things I do remember is my dad would work the graveyard shift on Thursday. And as soon as he got off, he would drive straight to Birmingham, which is like a 4-hour drive, and get there on Fridays. And I remember every weekend for those 3 months, our ritual was on Saturdays we would catch the syndication of Superstars, which was going on in the Birmingham area at that point, and we would always watch wrestling together. And that's I had always been a fan, but it kind of took on this whole new significance to me because it's one of the few memories from that time in my life and one of the few memories of me and my dad, when I was a kid that I've always held on to. So there's that, and then later on in life, when I got to be a teenager and he and I weren't on the best of terms, that was around the time of the 2002 return, No Way Out and WrestleMania 18 with The Rock and stuff. And it was kind of cool that wrestling kind of brought us back together a little bit. So Hogan's always had a sentimental place in my heart for those reasons, and just kind of been something that's always been constant. I think unlike Glenn, who is predominantly a fan of the red and yellow Hogan, I've pretty much been a massive fan of everything the guy's ever done. I was at the age where I hadn't yet completely turned on the red and yellow WCW Hogan. So when the NWO came around, it was at the perfect time for me to continue my Hogan fandom. So pretty much every era of the guy's career, I've been a massive fan. I think that's probably the shortest version of the story I can tell anyway.
So you had multiple reconstructive surgeries in your stomach, and you still find it okay to pour Fireball in there?
I know, really.
Yeah. That's a little bit of a concern. Not to get too off topic, but I only actually technically have 2/3 of the liver. So that's yeah.
Well, you're probably down to 1/3, to be honest, but
yeah.
All right,
35%. Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's hop in.
Hope you feel better about yourself, Nick.
Yeah.
Hey, I have my yearly checkup with the gastro, and he says my liver, what's there, is doing just fine. So we're all good.
Very good.
All right, excellent. It's good to have you here tonight.
Yeah, we want to make it to episode 600 with us.
Yeah.
In the 2 decades.
Too many more WrestleMania tailgates, so that's probably not going to happen.
I'm definitely buying you a bottle of Fireball next year.
Oh God. Okay.
All right, so let's go to February 5th, 1988, live from Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, Indiana. And this was the only show on that night. No other shows around the country. Big shock. No need for that because this is a big deal. Nationally, 2 of the matches nationally, 3, I guess, or 2.5 if you want to be picky, live on NBC. And we'll get to the rating later because that's just mind-blowing and to this day probably will never be touched. But here was the undercard on that evening. This is what you got off air if you bought a ticket that night. You did not just get 2 matches, believe me. The original first match was supposed to be Demolition taking on the team of Ken Patera and Billy Jack Haynes, but Kelly Nelson's greatest dreams, Billy Jerk, was gone by then, left the WWF. And so Ken Patera fought solo against Axe, Demolition Axe. And Axe won. Jake Roberts defeated the King Harley Race. Ron Bass defeated Coco Beware. The British Bulldogs defeated the Islanders. Hacksaw Jim Duggan defeated the One-Man Gang by disqualification. The Rock, Don Morocco, defeated Butch Reed. And the Ultimate Warrior pinned Sika. I cannot believe they were still using fucking Sika for any of this in early 1988. My God. So, any other notes, JR, before we hop in?
Yeah, from Mr. Greeny. He's delivering the notes here for us. He says, since our last show on January 25th on the 13088 Superstars, Bad News Brown made his debut, pinning Brady Boone. And the live broadcast of the main event here tonight that we're going to talk about drew a 15.2 Nielsen rating, 33 million viewers, both records for American televised wrestling. So, gentlemen, we are in the midst of wrestling history tonight that we'll be discussing.
Yeah, big deal. I mean, it's the first primetime weeknight wrestling in probably 40 years. Mm-hmm. Probably since the 50s or on DuPont or whatever. Yeah. So, big deal. Big deal tonight. And I think it was at 8 o'clock, if I remember correctly. I think it was
8 o'clock on a Friday. Yep.
8 o'clock on a Friday. So, big deal. All right, JR, let's hop in.
Yeah, we get some big-time hype, a huge, massive audience. Of course, we talked about the build extensively at the Royal Rumble, as well as our January MSG last week. So they've really been building this thing up. We get our usual promos, our opening animation. Then we head to Vince McMahon, Jesse Ventura. They open things up. We get a video of Hulk Hogan working out, fired up for tonight's action. And then we head over to Mean Gene, who's with the Honky Tonk Man and Jimmy Hart. They're feeling good about Honky's romance with Liz and keeping his title tonight. Gene's then with Macho Man Elizabeth. Savage says they'll be in the danger zone, and Liz has nothing to worry about because Honky has no chance here tonight. And that brings us to our opener, and that is for the Intercontinental title, the Honky Tonk Man and Randy Savage one more time, yet again, Scott. I think it's like the 7th time we've watched these guys fight.
Yes. Yes.
But we've at least had a break. Yeah. Nick, before you get into this match, are you familiar with any of like this feud building up to this match besides just, like Survivor Series or anything? Have you seen any of their matches at like MSG or anything?
No, I haven't gone back on the network yet and watched any of the old house shows. So unless it happened on like a random episode of Superstars or a pay-per-view, I probably don't have that much knowledge of it. So this was kind of something fresh for me. Know a good bit about both guys individually, but not really working together. So I was looking forward to checking this one out.
Yeah, they've had some good they had some really good matches, and then they kind of tapered by the end of the year. So I think the break was good, Scott, before we dig back into it now. All right, so Honky comes out with Jimmy Hart, and he also has Peggy Sue with him. And Jesse tells us this is the last place Elvis ever performed in Indianapolis before he fell asleep taking a shit and passed out for good. Randy Savage and Liz march out next, looking like mega stars, getting showered in love from the fans with an epic entrance as always. Honky bails, but Savage fetches him. He's all over him with ferocity. The crowd's flipping out as Savage batters the champ, smashing his head into Jimmy Hart's and then chasing him outside. Honky dodges a big charge, and Savage slams into the corner as Jesse says that's the first big mistake of the match. Savage quickly comes back, but Hart distracts him, and Macho chases, allowing Honky to grab the megaphone and bop Savage with it for 2. Jesse tells Honky to leave Liz alone and focus for now as the champ grabs a chinlock. Honky knees Savage to the floor, whips him to the rail, and then back inside. He dances for Liz and keeps kicking and punching. Savage starts to come back with jabs, but Honky cuts him down with a clothesline to keep control. Honky slides outside, stalks Liz, which brings Savage out for a save to just a monster reaction from the fans. Back inside, Savage goes right at the champ and slings him back to the floor before beating him with an axe handle off the top. Back again, Savage slams Honky, hits another axe handle. Hart gets in the ring to help. That backfires as Savage gets a sleeper. Peggy Sue goes after Liz, and Savage releases the hold and saves her. Honky gets caught coming outside and gets posted, and Savage wins the match by countout. The crowd goes nuts, but no title change yet again as Liz costs Savage, as she has a few times in this feud. Honky grabs his guitar, and Hart pelts Savage with the megaphone from behind. Liz gets in the ring, and Honky threatens to hit her with the guitar, but pulls away. Savage pops up and fights him off and stands tall with Liz, hopefully finally putting this one to bed for good. It's been a long feud. Honky escapes with his title. Savage gets the final win. Pretty paint by numbers for them, but the heat was just absurd. But again, not their best work. I think their returns diminished along the way since we first saw them start feuding in the fall. But it was fun, a lot of chaos, and the crowd is just bonkers, Scott. So I went 2.5 on this one.
I went 3 stars. I liked it. I think the crowd was nuclear, and I think that helped a lot. Savage is just getting so comfortable now in this role. I felt like when we were working with him the last 5 or 6 months of the second half of '87, I still think he was trying to like feel himself out as a babyface. But I think seeing it tonight, I mean, he's full blown embracing the crowd, treating Liz better. He actually helped her into the ring first, which he never used to do, obviously, and that got a big pop from the crowd. I think the fans are seriously into him right now. And Honky, I shudder to think at this moment what's going to happen from here on out because, I mean, the last 2 guys he's worked with, Steamboat and Savage, have just totally, put him over. I don't know what will happen next for him. Obviously, he will remain Intercontinental Champion for the time being. But with 2 awesome workers like Steamboat and Savage, I'm got to be a little leery about who would be next on the babyface side to challenge him because we will be getting soon to Atlantic City. So curious to see what their next step would be. But Nick, overall though, the crowd kind of pushed this, for me, the extra star along. What do you think of Honky in general? First of all, what do you think of the match? And secondly, what are your thoughts on Honky in general as a champion?
I think I kind of slide in somewhere between you two guys. I think I went 2 3/4 on this one. Like you already mentioned, the crowd was so hot for this match that it kind of wound up pushing it probably a little bit more than it should have been. It's one of those that if you watch it with the sound off, which is an argument I've always hated, it probably doesn't hold up as well. But that's one thing about this Indianapolis crowd. All night long, they were just, white hot in a town that, isn't often known as being a wrestling hotbed or whatever. So, never been the world's biggest fan of Honky, but I think here, putting him in with Savage and Savage with that natural intensity and feeding off of the intensity he's getting from the crowd, it kind of, all added up to be something more than the sum of its parts, No,
I agree. And also with the build and the hype, and this is actually a really smart match to put on this card. Obviously, the whole show has been built around Hogan and Andre, but to have a match this hot to get the crowd fired up, and it's like just add so many extra stakes. Like, okay, not only are we getting Hogan and Andre, we're also getting another title match. And not only is it just a title match, it's like the culmination of this red-hot feud that's been going since the fall. So they really didn't just rest on the laurels and figure Hogan and Andre would sell the show alone. They really jack it up to put over the big primetime special feel that they had going on. So I liked that they added that match on there too. So it was fine. Again, it was a step behind their other work, but overall, it was pretty good. What do you guys think of the debut of Peggy Sue here? Scott, this is the first time we've seen her, right? Or was she at MSG actually?
I believe I think she was at MSG. Yes. Okay. Yeah, she was.
Oh, so maybe to talk about her. What do you think of Peggy Sue, Nick?
I kept waiting for the wig to fall off. Like, even though I knew it didn't,
right.
Her dancing around and stuff, and it looked so fake. I kept waiting for that blonde wig to come tumbling off and everybody, be laughing at her, essentially, but it never happened. I don't know. Peggy Sue, I had no real strong feelings about her either way. I know they were trying hard to add things to the Honky Tonk Man's presentation at this point, but just kind of a shrug of the shoulders from me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Honky, to this point, because he's been embroiled in feuds with a Steamboat and with a Savage, he's almost been more closer to main event level than he is upper mid card. So it'll be interesting, Scott, to your point, who the next feud's going to be with. They haven't really set that up yet because will it keep him at this level? Will he elevate somebody, or will he sink back down? And then to Nick's point, is Peggy Sue a preemptive strike to help just add to his package to keep him, just kind of keep his profile higher?
Yeah, I like that point about Peggy Sue and kind of adding a little, because Jimmy's Jimmy, but Jimmy's going to have some other priorities coming up in '88 as well, probably. So him adding somebody similar to his gimmick, other than Jimmy. I know he's the Colonel, but was probably a smart idea because maybe she can be a linchpin for whatever comes next. Mm-hmm. So it's not a bad thing creatively to add him particularly her, because we know who she is, obviously, and God only knows what the women's division is going to be like in the next year or so. Might as well give her something to do.
Hey, speaking of Jimmy, I thought it was ultra weird with those promos that opened the show. Jimmy cutting the promo without the sunglasses on. I don't know that we've seen that a ton, so it certainly caught me as being jarring whenever I rewatched this past week.
It's a good point. Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah, I think usually you'd only see without him in a match if he got hit or something.
Yeah, if he got him knocked off or something, but they went with an intentional pre-tape without the sunglasses, which was just odd to me.
Yeah, either he forgot him or he was just real fired up. So
yeah.
All right, so that's that. Vince and Jesse then slow us way down and hype up the big WrestleMania 3 rematch to show us some highlights that brought us here to today. Gene then talks to Ted DiBiase, Andre the Giant, and Virgil. Says there'll be no shenanigans tonight with the referee. Virgil will ensure that. Hogan's been running for a year, but that ends tonight. DiBiase says he's ready thanks to the finest facilities and training he can buy. Gene then talks to Hogan, who says he won at WrestleMania 3, and he will finish this off finally tonight. And gentlemen, we're going to take a break before we get to this match, but before we talk about it, Nick, let's take a moment. You mentioned you had WrestleMania 3 was kind of the first thing you saw, and you kind of watched this in later years, which is the same as me. What are your thoughts on how, from what you've seen, looking back, your thoughts on how they protected Andre from WrestleMania 3 till now? He was out for a while. Do you feel like this whole thing feels just as big as 3 in some ways, or do you feel like it was starting to dull just a bit even coming here?
Well, it had to dull just a bit because, it's never going to feel as important as, the first time for these two guys, or not the first time, but, in their kayfabe version. The first time of these two guys in front of whatever the number is, let's go with 93,000 to avoid the bullshit debate out there in on the internet right now.
I think there's an alarm that goes off in Bix's apartment anytime anyone says 93,000.
But it's one of those things where like when I first watched the match, and even when I watch it to this day, I don't even register the whole like Andre allegedly having him down at 3 angle. The WrestleMania 3 match. I mean, and so playing that up in the months since, you're right, definitely protected Andre a lot. He was off TV. You bring him back. You pair him up with a hot new heel character in Ted DiBiase, and you kind of got a beautiful recipe, not to get back to that WrestleMania 3 level, but to probably do, as close to that as you could have possibly done. Now, unfortunately, in later months, as we wind up seeing, the bloom was entirely off that rose by the time they get to Atlantic City, at least as it relates to Hulk and Andre feeling special or having that big fight feel or whatever.
Yeah, I think running it within months of each other probably did not help. But yeah, the match here to me still felt like a pretty big deal. Rewatching it now, like all play out, Andre was really well hidden and protected. He went left with the back surgery, comes back, and Scott, like we've seen it evolve on these MSG shows where he just keeps coming out and just like beat the shit out of everyone. He first showed up in whatever it was, like December, he gets booed, and then it's kind of evolved. He beat up Hogan and Royal Rumble. So actually watching it all play out, I've gained more of an appreciation for the gravity of this situation in this match than I think I used to have. Because even for Survivor Series, Andre's well protected. They keep them apart generally, and Andre looks good. But man, those months between Survivor Series and here, at least for the local New York market, I don't know what else they did with him anywhere else around the country, but they really did a nice job of like setting this up as just a big deal. And Nick, you called it out, the 3 count played way more of a role than I ever remembered either. Like that's been the crux of this whole rematch, and Bobby's been talking about it for almost a year. That they felt that he was fucked at WrestleMania because they thought it was a 3 count. So it's a really you always hear about the Mega Powers being like the year-long story. At this time is like an example of their booking, but man, this story too, from WrestleMania 3 to here, was really well executed for Hogan and Andre.
Yeah, because oh, sorry, Nick, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Scott.
No, I was just going to say the big reason is, JR, and we've talked about this numerous times, Andre's absence actually made the storyline even better because, him kind of waiting in the wings, like, I'll be back. Let Hogan have his months. I'll be back. Or I'll be back, in his Andre voice. And we didn't hear much about Andre from, say, May to October, really. And Hogan went on his other feuds, and we had our matches at MSG, et cetera, and then all of a sudden, oh shit, he is still around, and Hogan, now since then he's been pretty much antagonized with multiple beatdowns, and Andre's just been an animal. I mean, just relentless. Now there's a storyline plot hole that I sometimes can't shake off. We'll get more into that in the next segment when we talk about the match itself. But Nick, it's clear that a lot of times when a guy leaves, you get a little concerned as things, do things fade. But in this instance, Andre not being around actually made the feud better, not worse.
Undoubtedly. I mean, you're talking about it from a sheer storyline perspective, and as we'll discuss after the break, keeping him away was probably best for people not to realize how physically limited he was by this point, because less than a year removed from WrestleMania 3, we'll talk about it, Andre is just not capable of doing anywhere near the level of match that he did at WrestleMania 3. And it's not like that is a work rate classic by any stretch of the imagination. So I think basically on every front, this break for Andre was a positive thing for everybody involved.
I agree.
Absolutely.
So we'll see if that layoff did indeed help him, Scott. So why don't we go ahead and take a break? Listen to a brand new break that we've put together here. It's highlighting some new shows coming down. We'll talk about those later as well. And when we return, we'll get to the big WrestleMania 3 rematch.
Because.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which of course includes the full archives of the Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero and Chad Campbell here. We want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlaceToBeNation.com. We offer them to you on two great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation Wrestling feed, we bring you the Mothership, the Place to Be Podcast, along with Main Event, Survey Says, the Monday Night Wars, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction show, as well as Jeff Learns Wrestling. In addition to these full-length shows, we also deliver special network podcasts and pod blasts on topics old and new.
Over on the Pro Wrestling Only feed, we dive deep inside the wrestling business with a stacked army of experts leading the way. The feed features potpourri shows such as This Week in Wrestling, Greetings from Allentown, Match of the Week podcast, and the Military Industrial Suplex. We also have shows that focus intently on certain topics like Through the Years, Worldcast, Strong Style History, Strong Style Story, and Mount Olympus. Plus, the feed has the full archives of legendary shows like Titans of Wrestling, Where the Big Boys Play, Letters from Center Stage, and Letters from Kayfabe, plus much more. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as Talkin' Pop, the Glenn Butler Podcast Hour Spectacular, NBA Team, PTB in Play, Sunday Groove, Breaking Balls, and Lucha Undead.
As well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans.
With the Hard Traveling Fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and Marvel Age Podcasts.
You can find all of these current shows, plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback today. All these shows, plus others, available at PlayStation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus in-depth stretch projects, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlayStation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Boneheads Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, and thehistoryofwrestling.com. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlayStationNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Hey, this is Scott Keith, the former net cop, and you're listening to the Place to Be Podcast.
Too much of this and not enough of that. You better listen up, 'cause you
All right, Nation, we are back talking the main event from February 1988. Myself, Scott, and Nick Duke, and hopefully everyone's enjoying the show. I know I am. And, you know, Nick, we had a hole to fill on this evening for this show, and like we talked about earlier, I was trying to think who the one big Hulkamaniac was, and I said, Nick, I need you tonight, just like I needed you in New Orleans, I needed you tonight, and that is the song playing underneath us here as we transition into Scott Criscolo's Pop Culture Corner. And, of course, Scott, the band behind that song is also familiar to Nick Duke because it's called In Excess. So, of course, that's how we live our lives.
So, only during football season and WrestleMania weekends, sir.
Only through, like, 6 of the 12 months of the year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Only between bars and hedges for Nick Duke. Anyway, yes, thank you, JR. And that is indeed Need You Tonight by In Excess from Australia, which is far away from anywhere in Alabama.
It's the home of Stacey O'Loughlin, though, so it all comes together here tonight for us.
There we go. Yeah. Hi, Stace. So, number 1, Need You Tonight by In Excess. Number 2, Could Have Been by Tiffany. It could have been, Nick Duke. Could have been a nice bag of merchandise and keys, but not to be. Sitting in a porta potty in a random construction site. All right. Tiffany at number 2. Number 3, Hazy Shade of Winter by the Bangles, or Hazy Evening in the Bourbon in the French Quarter. Every song could have Nick's life accentuated by it. Number 4, The Way You Make Me Feel by Michael Jackson. I am not going there. Number 5, Seasons Change by Expose. At number 6, I Want to Be Your Man by Roger. Yeah, Cowboy. Number 7, Got My Mind Set on You by George Harrison. Number 8, Hungry Eyes from Dirty Dancing. When they looked at Nick's barbecue,
yes.
Everybody had hungry eyes, just like Pete.
Thank you, sir.
You might have found our closing song tonight. Hungry Eyes is a fantastic.
Yes, I think so. Number 9, Candle in the Wind by Elton John. And number 10, Tell It to My Heart by Taylor Dane.
It's a pretty strong week of music here. So.
Yeah, very good. Exceptional. So there you go. So there's your number 1, In Excess with Need You Tonight, which came out the previous Saturday, January 30th, 1988. So the next day, Saturday, February 6th, would be a new list. So, JR, 2 movies out came out that evening. So for those that didn't like wrestling, this is what you went and saw. The first one, She's Having a Baby.
Oh, she is, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have to use protection. This film portrays a young newlywed couple, Christy and Jake Briggs. The film is an existential look at the lives of Jefferson, Jake, and Christy Briggs from their wedding day until the birth of their first child. Beginning on the wedding day, it follows both their lives, but more so Jake's, who does voiceover commentaries and several imaginary scenes based on actual or featured future events. Jake asks his best friend Davis McDonald before the wedding if he thinks he'll be happy, to which his friend says, yeah, you'll be happy, you just won't know it. And that is the underlying theme of the movie. Jake's crisis of, is this all there is? Is this really my life? And does this speak volumes to all of us here? Kevin Bacon is Jefferson Briggs, Elizabeth McGovern, Kristen Briggs, Alec Baldwin, check in as Davis McDonald, Catherine Damon, John Ashton, Wild Bill Irwin is in here as grandfather Briggs. Edie McClurg, of course, the Hogan family.
That's right.
And many other shows, as you know.
Yep.
Woody Harrelson has a cameo in this thing. Michael Keaton. Matthew Broderick is Ferris Bueller in the cameo.
So, it's Ferris Bueller in the cameo.
It is.
Wow. Must have been maybe the movie was on. It's kind of odd. Anyway, the other movie that came out on this day, one of those
hang on, so I can clarify right now. As the credits roll, there's a rapid succession of suggestions for the name of the baby, with cameos by Roy Orbison, Joanna Kearns, Magic Johnson, name it AIDS, Ted Danson, Woody Harrelson, Will Wheaton, Belinda Carlisle, Kirstie Alley, John Candy, Dan Aykroyd, Matthew Broderick were all in character as Chet Ripley, Roman Craig, and Ferris Bueller during their part of the credits. So, Nick, have you ever seen
John Hughes directed this.
Right.
So, did he direct Ferris Bueller's Day Off? I'm curious.
Yeah.
No, so there you go. It's all John Hughes characters.
Have you ever seen this movie, Nick? She's Having a Baby?
Never. Not once.
All right. You probably didn't see this one either. The next one is called The Unbearable Lightness of Being. Not likeness, JR. Lightness, like light and dark. Lightness of being.
Okay. Charismatic Czech brain surgeon Tomas, a successful Lothario in the communist Czechoslovakia, is pursuing a love-hate affair with Sabina, an equally carefree artist in Prague. One day, Dr. Tomas makes a long-distance call to a spa town for a specialized surgery. There he meets dissatisfied waitress Teresa, who desires intellectual stimulation. She tracks him down in Prague and moves in with him, complicating Tomas's extra-domestic sexual affairs. Starring Daniel Day-Lewis as Tomas, Juliette Binoche, Lena Olin, and a whole bunch of nobody else's. Clovis.
I just like the way you said Tomas and Lothario.
He is a Lothario. Jose Lothario.
That was very good. Jose Lothario, yes. So there were your 2 movies that came out the same night as. So the percentage is very high that the wives and moms went out to see She's Having a Baby, and the dads and kids were watching what we're doing. So, in sports, the NFL season is over. Congratulations to Doug Williams and the Washington Redskins, who won Super Bowl 22. A 5-touchdown second quarter. They beat the Denver Broncos 42-10. And there is Doug Williams, not only the first black quarterback to start a Super Bowl, but also the first one to win MVP of the Super Bowl. So congratulations to Doug Williams and the Washington Redskins. In the NBA on this evening, this Friday night, guess what? It was All-Star Weekend in the NBA. So that Sunday, the 7th, was the All-Star game at Chicago Stadium in Chicago. The East beat the West 138-133. And for you, Mr. Duke, Dominique Wilkins had 29 points.
There you go.
And, are you a big Hawks fan, Nick? I feel like you never really talk about that.
I just said it because you're from Georgia, but
I am a Hawks fan. My history with the Hawks was complicated by the fact that when I was a kid, my favorite player on the Hawks was Dikembe Mutombo, and so when they traded him, it broke my little Hawks heart, and I stayed mad at him for a good 10, 12 years before I finally came back around. Once they finally blew up that god awful Josh Smith led team, I wound up coming back around in the last 5, 6 years or so.
Well, the other reason I said Dominique is because he is a Georgia alum.
Yes, he is.
So that's the other reason why I said Dominique.
Michael Georgia, Nick.
Yeah, a little bit. It's casual.
It's not my gimmick or anything.
Yeah, Michael had 40, and he won the game MVP, obviously, in his home building. I think he won the dunk the night before, too. So he was the leading scorer for the East. In the West, let's see. The leading scorer was Karl Malone of the Jazz with 22. Hakeem Olajuwon had 21. And the East beat the West 138-133 in the NBA All-Star game. That's that following Sunday in Chicago.
I sure hope they played Jai Silbero when he won.
Your top 10, your AP top 10 in college basketball. Arizona was number 1, and 2 through 10, BYU, UNLV, Temple, Duke, Purdue, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Pittsburgh, and Kentucky.
So pretty straightforward. Wasn't there? There was a weird one a couple weeks ago or something.
Yeah, well, Temple had a great team. Mark Macon. So it was weird that Temple was pretty high. But
Dan McGinn went there and destroyed the whole program.
Exactly, yeah, blew the whole thing up. Well, Arizona had Sean Elliott, Steve Kerr, of course, current Warriors coach. He was on that team. So there's your college basketball top 10. And in hockey on this evening, there were 5 games. I'm assuming, Mr. Duke, you were not a Thrashers fan when they were down there.
I'm not even sure what a hockey is. You're going to have to explain it to me a little bit.
Not exactly Pete Winston here.
Damos punched a hole in the wall.
Yes. Yes. Then he covered it with a rack.
Matt Souza just drove his car into the Fall River Harbor.
To the Fall River. Bruins, by the way, we're not playing on this evening. Any of our Police Nation teams?
Not playing tonight either.
No, they're not. Sadly, they're not. Yeah, it was rough. Rough end of the season yesterday, but that's all right. Well, Kelly Nelson's Flames lost 5-1 to the Red Wings on this evening. And that's it. So, there you go. There is your pop culture corner. So, back to Indianapolis.
No one puts baby in the corner, and no one puts the WWF in the back seat for tonight. We have Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant, number 2, and here we go with a massive rematch we've been waiting nearly a year for. Andre been pissed about that false 3 count since Pontiac gets his chance at redemption. The crowd shows plenty of hate for DiBiase, Andre, and Virgil, and the tone is set. I think adding DiBiase here has really freshened things up and added a new slant to keep things boiling. We didn't mention that earlier when we talked about this feud, but you might have mentioned it a little bit, Nick, but putting him in the mix, I think, really helped refreshen things. So that was a shrewd move there. Hogan comes powering to the ring, a force of nature, to a massive reaction. Hogan goes right at Andre, but the Giant backs off. The ref cools things down as Jesse says the champ better pace himself. After some feeling out, Hogan smacks Andre and beats the shit out of DiBiase and Virgil too, sending them flying to the floor. The crowd's losing it as Hogan hammers away at Andre too, rocking him with right hands and elbows. Jesse says Hulk is smarter here than he was at 3, not trying for body slams and stuff like that, which I agree with, Scott, because we talked about Hogan's faulty psychology in that match back at Pontiac. Yes. Hogan fends off DiBiase and Virgil, sending a wad of cash flying in the air, and then goes to the eyes before hitting a clothesline in the corner. Andre stays on his feet, staggered but not falling. Hogan goes up top. Andre catches him and slams him to the mat in a nice spot. Hogan's starting to wrestle stupid again, though, like at 3. Dodges a falling headbutt, and both men are hurting. Andre grabs a choke and rattles Hogan with it, throwing him to the mat. Andre shoots Hogan hard into the corner and stomps on his hand before slamming him down. Andre keeps battering the champ. As Jesse says, referee Hebner has been outstanding in playing it down the middle. And, of course, that's a shot at Joey Marella, who he was dumping all over for WrestleMania. Andre levels Hulk with a boot that sends him outside, and Virgil lays in a shot and shoves him back in, which Jesse puts over as smart. Andre chokes away some more, and Hogan powers up, starts to unload some fists, and goes to the eyes. Hogan goes to the second rope, and it's a clothesline to take Andre down. But then Virgil hooks Hogan's ankle. Hogan shakes him off and hits the leg drop. But the referee is tied up with Virgil. He can't count. Hogan gets up and argues with Hebner, and Andre comes over, hits a pair of headbutts to the back of the head, follows with a generous, we'll call it, double underhook suplex. Andre covers Hogan, but Hulk gets his arm up at 2. However, The referee keeps counting, hits the 3 count, and gives Andre the Giant the win and the title. The crowd is pissed off. Hogan, of course, is bitching right away. Hebner hands Andre the title in a great moment, and then Andre turns around and forfeits it to Ted DiBiase, who is now the WWF champion. A second Hebner then comes out, and everyone's confused and befuddled. They argue until Hogan comes in and tries to piece everything together before eventually chucking the bad Hebner over the top and over Virgil and DiBiase in a pretty wild bump. He just threw him over both of them. He goes flying into the walkway. Amazing moment in booking here. All-time classic. The crowd reaction is tremendous. The match itself is pretty good, too. Better than WrestleMania, maybe from a work perspective, but of course doesn't have the atmosphere and heat that did. The story of the work was well done, with Hogan just unloading bombs before slipping up, and DiBiase and Virgil stuff is paid off in spades. The aftermath is all-time great as well. Amazing across the board. Iconic moment. Delivers in prime time. I kind of struggled with the grade here. Because again, work, while better than 3, is still pretty low, but the atmosphere, the heat is crazy. So I went 3.5. It's below 3 overall, but still pretty amazing what they were able to twist around and pull out here. So I really enjoyed watching this again. The heat, again, is insane, and the storyline is just brilliant. So, Nick, what did you think of this whole package?
Yeah, like you said, it's not up to the level of 3 for me anyway, but I thought it held up pretty well, especially because there are points in the match. I think the suplex that you mentioned is probably the most noticeable point, where it's pretty obvious that Andre is having a tough time physically. I thought it looked like he had declined a pretty good bit in terms of his overall health from Pontiac to here. So I wound up going 2.5. I'm shocked that I'm going lower than somebody else in this podcast on this match. So I'm so taken aback by that right now. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I thought, like you said, having DiBiase and Virgil in the mix helped to cover for Andre a little bit, where you kind of had DiBiase and Virgil to bump around on the outside and garner heat from the fans. And like you said, the crowd is into this the entire time, and that liquid, white hot level of heat just pushes it over the top and makes it once again something that, technically speaking, isn't all that great, but the atmosphere and the overall, the post-match stuff with the screwy finish and Hogan press slamming fake Dave Hebner into orbit is still one of my favorite moments from my childhood wrestling experiences. I think I've become so immersed in this story and era between this show and doing it with Jeff. We're pretty much on the same timeline. So I think I don't know. I just become so into it that I think it enhanced it even more for me. I want to look back at what I gave 3, because I think I gave it. So I went 4 stars at 3. So yeah, I would put this just a notch below. I mean, I think the crowd isn't that far off, like from a reaction and heat position, and the storyline is insane. So and I thought that work was actually a little bit better than 3. I thought Hogan wrestled a smarter match, which I liked. That was part of my bitch at 3 as well. So yeah, that's kind of where I fell, Scott.
I gave it 3 stars. As a fan at that moment, when I was watching it, and I was watching it live, I could say now, for a little bit anyway, you can almost feel how those fans at MSG felt in 1971 when Ivan Koloff won. Just a bit. Because as a fan, I was a bunch of us were watching it, and none of us knew what to say. I mean, we were literally staring at the TV in fucking disbelief. I mean, it was unbelievable television and unbelievable storytelling. Because at that time, you never thought he was going to lose, ever.
No.
Yeah,
especially in this match. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a big... It's such a unique setting. I can't imagine many fans walking in the arena that night were anticipating him, especially getting screwed like that. I mean, maybe they're anticipating a loss a little bit, but the confusion and him getting hosed the way he did, and then on top of it, Andre handing the belt, like, it's so much to soak in if you're a fan there. It's like, holy shit, you're just processing that Hogan lost, and now you're all of a sudden Andre's giving the title up. It's crazy.
Yeah. But to sit there and just... I don't know what to think. I mean, I was like, holy shit, did this just really happen? I mean, he'll get the belt back this weekend on Superstars, or we still have another 40 minutes, or whatever it is, 20 minutes left in the show. He'll just get it handed back. I mean, and then you just didn't know what to think. It was tremendous television, 33 million people. It's tremendous television.
If this was the NWA, Hogan would be handing the title back on a dusty finish. Then,
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you have to wonder too how many fans were thinking that at the time. I mean, I don't know, Scott. I guess you can maybe, yeah, right. Were they just going to give it like? Were they going to nullify what happened?
Yeah, I thought, this isn't going to happen. Jack's, President Jack. We're waiting for Gorilla to say President Jack Tunney's going to come out and just hand the belt back to Hogan, and everything's going to be great. Joey Morello, give it to him. Everything will be awesome.
You guys may be able to. I had a question about the belt itself, actually, that I thought you guys might be able to answer since you've been tracking the house shows and stuff. When did he actually debut this new world title? Because going back to the promos that opened the show, he's actually wearing the old title design in the promo, but carrying the new belt out to the ring.
Yes, I was about to actually mention that. They had to have taped those. Those promos. I don't know, a couple days before. I don't know, a week before. Because I just don't. I'm trying to figure out the logic in having one belt and then another belt. It just makes no sense. It's very strange.
Maybe they just didn't want to debut it in a ho-hum backstage. Maybe they figured him blasting through the curtain with it or something was more more meaningful.
Right,
I mean, I don't know why he just didn't have no belt in the back then. Just don't even have it with him.
I know. Yeah, very weird. I'm trying to think. He had the old belt at the Rumble. Yeah. So, yeah. In terms of the match, they definitely had a little more spunk. I even said it when I watched it again last week. I said Andre even looks like he has a little more pep in his step.
Mm-hmm.
Like Pontiac, he definitely looked laboring. Yeah, he was laboring at WrestleMania. But here, he definitely looks like he's got a little more pep in his step, and so the time off definitely helped here, almost even more than than at Mania. My only thing was, I get the whole DiBiase, wanting to buy the title and all that kind of stuff, but here's Andre, who a year earlier rips the cross off his chest on Piper's Pit, and all he wanted was to be world champion. And a year later, the money was more important than that? Does that even make it more of a heel, or does that kind of kill the logic a little bit? You know what I'm saying? Like, Andre was so obsessed with turning heel and getting Bobby and wanting that belt. And now a year later, it's, I got a nice check, so here you go. I don't know.
I think he became so obsessed with... I feel like we may have talked about that. I feel like Jeff might have asked a similar question, but I think maybe he became so obsessed with screwing Hogan and taking the title away that he kind of stopped caring about even being champion. Like, it became an obsession with him there, and I don't think he cared about the money because Bobby's the one that really made out. I think it just became, all right, DiBiase's the new boss, and, my whole goal is just getting the belt off of Hogan. Like, fuck him. Like, at this point, I don't think he even cared to be champion. I think he just wanted to screw Hogan. He was so tired of him. Like, it started as two friends, him just challenging his friend because he wants the title. He never got a title shot. And now he's just become, obsessed with beating Hogan and taking the title off him. I don't know, Nick, you feel similar?
Yeah, I kind of take it as, like, WrestleMania 3 was such an embarrassing moment for that character that you got, like we touched on earlier, he kind of goes into hiding for an extended period of time. And so when he comes back, his motivation isn't necessarily the title so much as it is revenge and humiliating Hulk Hogan. And being able to screw him over here, get the title off of him, and then force him to watch him hand the belt over to DiBiase, who we know Hogan despises, it's almost like he's getting to, put the needle to him twice in a very short span. So I kind of bought it from the character perspective.
Well, that's a good point, Nick. Yeah. At this point, it's just making Hogan's life miserable and just make him unhappy. Break him. That makes sense. I could see that. Sure.
Of all the moments and like everything to do with this match, what is each of you's like most iconic visual? Is it DiBiase with the belt on? Is it Andre holding the title? Is it like kind of the pre-match when they're both standing there kind of face to face? Is it Hogan throwing Hebner? Like, what is your one iconic visual?
To me, it's still Hogan throwing Hebner. Like, I remember, when Greg and I first became friends, us joking about that moment, and like it's been a recurring joke throughout our friendship because we always say that Dave Hebner is still out there in orbit somewhere, passing around the moon and the stars, because Hogan, launches him straight over the head of DiBiase and Virgil, who were supposed to catch him, and it's a sick looking bump, and just shows off some of Hogan's freakish strength at the time. So even above, like you mentioned, DiBiase standing there with the title, or Hogan, losing it and walking around the ring with his head in his hands. I don't know. Something about that press slam has always been the visual that stuck with me the most.
I think for me, it's that exasperated look on Hogan's face as he's staring at both Earl and Dave, or Dave and Dave. Just that look like, what the hell just happened and what the hell am I looking at kind of thing. I mean, because that look that he has is the look that I think the 33 million people had that look on their face too. Just all at the same time, like the landscape in the WWF just changed right now. It was nice and comfy. Hogan was champ, all was right in the world, and then what the fuck is this? So the look that Hogan's giving the two Hebners is the look that the 33 million people watching that night gave each other and the TV screen. Just disbelief.
I think mine's Andre with the belt, and then like Hannah gets to DiBiase, like the image of DiBiase putting the belt, because that's like the real what the fuck moment of the whole thing. It's like, how is this guy now champion? But I think it speaks to the way they booked and handled this match and moment and storyline. Is that we all just named 3 equally iconic moments that could all stand out. And, we didn't even really talk about the match, which was iconic in its own right thanks to the heat. So, there's so much to this that really stands out. And it's amazing booking. I feel like it is kind of a story that gets overlooked from the year-to-year standpoint. I think this moment ges well lauded as an iconic match and storyline. But, Scott, watching it all play out over the course of the year has made me gain a better appreciation for what it told. There's the story of Andre, and Nick, you nailed it with him slowly kind of going into dementia and snapping and just wanting the belt off him after his layoff. So all that, plus we've seen Andre be booked as a monster, Scott, on these MSGs, just beating the shit out of it. So I feel like it was really a well-told story that they told from 3 to here. So I feel like it deserves more credit as an arc versus just a story, in-match story.
Yeah. I think it's finally even though we've had, a couple of years of us doing since the refresh January of 85, we've had these ebb and flow feuds and storylines involving Hogan and all the other top guys. But this arc that started back in early February when he came in on Piper's Pit, ripped the cross, and Piper saying, "You're bleeding," and to hear. This is what Vince has been waiting for. That opportunity to really suck the fans in with the opportunity to be able to show more of it than they did back in the 70s. I'm sure Bruno probably had feuds like this, but at the same time, the only real thing you got was when you went out to the shows. There wasn't much TV. I mean, there was some TV. It really wouldn't kick in until the late 70s. But this is what Vince has finally needed for this company in the Federation era, was that one long-term story arc that hooked everybody for the whole year. Like I said, even though Andre wasn't around from, late April till, early October, late September, early October, you knew he was around. So you knew in the back of your mind, even though all of the stuff you're watching, the house shows, the Saturday Night's Main Events, the Cindy's, you always knew that Andre would be back, even though he wasn't in front of you. And that, I think, is what Vince has needed to really put the product over as a national product. So this was like his last great goal. He conquered pay-per-view. He conquered, cable syndication. The last thing he probably had on his checklist that he could, go to the cemetery, go visit Vince Sr. and say, "Dad, I got the last thing on the list. I conquered broadcast television in primetime. 33 million people. And Hogan and Andre got me that. Just like they got me 93,000 at the Superdome." So as I pull a Hogan, the Silverdome. So when you look at it from that perspective, Vince was probably smiling in the back like he was smiling at the Silverdome.
So
this is what I've wanted.
Let me ask you this. Fan fiction aside, you just told. Let me ask you this, Scott. So it's been a while now since you infamously at WrestleMania 2 said that Hogan... Was it WrestleMania 2 where you said Hogan should have lost the title?
No.
Big event? Whatever the fuck it was. There was some
it was the Saturday Night's Main Event in... the one in... The one I was at in Hartford that Orndorff should have won in the cage.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So I thought there was another one too you asked about. It
Piper winning at the Wrestling Classic.
Correct. Okay. So there's been a few
Piper
times now that you've talked about Hogan maybe should have lost the title.
Uh-huh.
Now that we're here and he's finally lost it, would this moment have had that impact if we had done the title changes you wanted to do back in the day? Or was it worth persevering through?
No, it was worth persevering through. Yep.
Okay. What do you think?
No, there's no doubt.
Was was Hogan's title reign handled perfectly, or would you have had him lose it to someone along the way at some point?
No, I think the only person you could make the argument for would have been Orndorff, kind of like Scott would have said, just because those two I always felt had fantastic chemistry, and that would have just enabled you to stretch that feud out a little longer and put it back on Hogan at some point. But, I think it was handled almost perfectly. And, we saw earlier in the show, now you've got somebody else who, while he isn't there to that Hogan level of over as a babyface, Savage is coming up the ladder pretty quickly. And you've got somebody else that you can throw into the picture and, at least attempt to move the company beyond being entirely focused around Hulk Hogan as the only, real top-level babyface. So this is kind of the time, it feels like, going into WrestleMania 4 to shake things up a bit and, kind of refresh that title picture. You still got Hogan and Andre with a natural feud, and I think it's undeniable that Savage and DiBiase would seem to be more natural pairings for one another, at least in terms of an in-ring perspective, both a little bit more athletic, a little bit more you can do there. So I thought this whole deal, Hogan's title run up to this point, and what this sets the stage for, all handled pretty much perfectly.
All right, so we head backstage where Gene is with Hogan, who's a mess. He's in tears over what happened. Gene wants an investigation. Hogan wonders, how much did he pay for the plastic surgery, brother? The Hulkamaniacs were watching DiBiase, and Virgil was locked down, but he got screwed by the referee. Hogan melts down, but just as we see him walk off, we see Jack Lanza as well. It takes us to black at a rare production snafu at this time. Obviously, adapting to the live TV here. Nick, what did you think of this promo? Were you brought to tears?
Absolutely amazing promo. Like, I mean, you try not to compare what the guys are doing today to this, but like, man, it seems like every modern day babyface, when they lose the title or when they get screwed over or when something bad happens to them, they come out the next week and they're cutting jokes and laughing about it, and nothing ever seems to have any real emotional stakes. But here, you get the impression that Hulk Hogan has just suffered like one of the most emotionally traumatizing events of his entire life. He's borderline in tears. He's screaming about like God knows what at times. He's wondering about plastic surgery allowed, and that is that even a possible thing? But he gets over the impression that he is so distraught that he's grasping at any straw that he can reach for to explain what just happened because he truly can't understand it. This, I love Hulk Hogan's promo style from this era, but I think this is a sneakily underrated one. It might be one of his, even though it's short, one of his best promos of all time, I thought, in the context of the angle they had just run.
What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy who was the face of the company, and he's never looked this distraught. I mean, even with when you talk locally, JR, and all of the MSG we've watched, like when he feuded with Kamala, and he had the matches with Harley, and that even in '85 when he had that trilogy with Morocco. Yeah, he was angry, would lose, still had the gold around his waist, even if he lost by countout or something. This is different. I mean, the thing that most identifies him with the fans is that gold around his waist is not there. And it literally is like a piece of him is gone. So, great job by Hogan to tap into emotions he hasn't had to deal with.
Yeah.
In terms of, emoting the storyline and putting it over.
I do like how he always brings in the fans. Like, they were watching DiBiase for me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I mean, it's great, but it's also ridiculous.
It is.
Okay. So then we close things out with a tag team match. Strikeforce battling the Hart Foundation. Big time filler. Reigniting an old feud. The belts are on the line. So we're really propping up this card. 3 title matches. However, we only see about a minute of this match and we go off the air, which I thought added to the nice live feel as well. Like, all right, the card's going to go on, but on TV we only have this hour and we're out. Everything else be damned. But again, I think it really added to the hype of the night for the fans to get 3 title matches here. So that is the end of the show. Any quick thoughts on how they handled the Strike Force thing, Scott?
Makes you watch the Cindy's because you're going to assume that the next day, Saturday, on either Superstars or Challenge, you'll find out what the fuck happened in the Hogan match, and is Strike Force still your tag team champion? So at the moment, you're like, fuck, man. But at the time, most of us were like, I don't even want the show to continue.
Right,
Please go off the air. I can't deal with any of this.
So I know tag title match, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. You're like, I just go off the air. I need a moment.
Right.
That was fine. It got you wanting to watch the Cindy's the next day.
What'd
you think, Nick?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I thought it was really cool the fact that they have this match in the ring, but they are putting over the idea that there's a tag title match in the ring, but the really important thing is what has just happened with Hogan and Andre, because I think this match is actually in the ring as Hogan is cutting that promo we just talked about. So that gets over to the crowd like, yeah, we know the tag titles are important, but this is a monumental event, the likes of which we've never seen before. This warrants special circumstances. So the way they kind of just worked around this tag title match and kind of sort of ignored it, like Scott said, both provided you incentive to come back and watch the television, later in the weekend, but also just added to that feeling of importance over what had just happened with Hogan and Andre. So I loved the whole closing 3 to 4 minutes of this show.
And that does it for this show. A very important one in the books. It was great to look back at. It definitely holds up real well, and we'll see how that pans out with our grades. Nick, I realize I did not send you the award categories, but feel free to jump in. Probably didn't get to prep, but luckily for you, there's only 2 matches, so they're all pretty easy. Okay. So match of the night is our first one we always do, and I think, for me, anyway, it's an easy choice with Hogan versus Andre.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yep.
You agree?
No, I go Savage and Honky Tonk for me personally, but okay. I think if you count the entire Hogan thing as one giant presentation, I think clearly the post-match stuff is easily like a segment of the night if you're doing something like that.
Yeah, we'll count it all as one. So we're going Hogan Andre. We usually count the segment, like everything to do with the match.
Oh, okay, then absolutely Hogan Andre over Savage Honky Tonk for sure. If you're counting it all as one presentation.
All right, we do also do a worst match of the night, and that is our Cousin Junior award because he was so filled with shit matches. So this one's unfair in many ways. I almost feel like we should, just maybe abstain, Scott. But Savage Honky to me is technically worse, unless you count Strike Force, the Heart Foundation. I'm okay absolving this one and just going NA. I don't know if you agree, Scott. If that's
no,
okay with you.
We have to. We can't. That's not fair to Savage and Honky. That's not fair.
We've had some tough ones before. Where we've docked good matches as the worst, but nothing as good as that. To me, 2.5 should not get worst match award. So
right.
I'm already going NA on that. Yep. All right, the Hogan Award, which is our MVP of the night. I went with both Hogan and Andre. Cheated a little bit. I thought they both played their roles perfectly. They got the story over beautifully. Both guys worked their asses off. Everything, they both came to play tonight. And Andre's been on a hot streak for me. He's been every time he's been on, he's been my MVP of the night over the last 6 shows or so. But I thought they split it here tonight. What did you think, Nick?
I can see the argument for that, but the post-match promo, like we just talked about a few minutes ago, because I love that post-match promo so much, puts it over the top. So Hogan would be my MVP of the night.
Okay. Scott?
I'll go with you, JR. I think both them equally. They culminated this 1-year saga, which isn't over, obviously, but this was huge, and they had to put such an iconic, historic spin. They deserve 50-50 of the credit for it.
Okay. All right, moment of the night. I'm sorry, no, wait. First we have our Uncle Elmer, who is the LVP, the worst worker of the night. I went with Honky here. I didn't think he was great in that match. I thought Savage carried a lot of it. I'm kind of honkied out. I was high on him in late 87. He's kind of dulled a little bit for me, but maybe he's out of this feud. We'll see. So he's my Elmer for tonight. But again, probably a little bit unfair, Scott, but what are you going to do? It's the way the show went.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No.
You agree?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it kind of has to be by default.
Okay. All right, moment of the night, to me, was the finish of the match with Andre and Hogan. Andre winning the title. Our moment of the night, Scott, since Survivor Series has been the end of the main event, Andre refusing to leave ringside in the November Series main event, January Series main event, Andre attacking Hogan, Royal Rumble, Hogan, Andre being an asshole, and 125 MSG, Hogan, Andre attacks Hogan and Bigelow. So Andre's won a ton of these now, and he gets it again from me tonight. Him finally winning the world title from Hogan the moment with the referee counting 3 when he shouldn't have counted 3. Like, all that finish, to me, is the best moment.
Yeah, because it's historic. Hogan's title run is over. That's the moment. It's over. And that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely got to be that. I mean, that close to that match and the ensuing little bit they had post-match with the 2 referees and the presentation of the belt to DiBiase, it's clearly got to be that.
All right, and finally we have the Morocco Award. That is for the most juiced-up wrestler of the night, and I thought it was an easy choice tonight. Not a ton of competition for once. I went with Hogan on this evening.
Yes, I agree.
I don't know what you're referring to, and I find that assertion offensive, sir, and I will not stand for it.
I'll tell you, Hogan's making a run at Morocco for this award, Scott. We're going to tally it up. It's been a lot of Hogan, a lot of Morocco.
And one night one show they both did it.
Yeah, they split it because we couldn't even decide. But
yes. No Dino grabbing one of these awards yet?
Dino won at.
He's got 2 so far.
Yeah, he won in December, and then he won back in July. Yeah, he hasn't blown up as much. He gets bigger. Dino, it's coming, I think, with him. But Morocco is so fucking absurd at this point that it's hard to unseat him. Morocco split.
He's actually a better wrestler, which is even more ridiculous.
Morocco split with his. He co-won with the kind of the grandfather of this award, Ivan Putski, back in October. Morocco. It was kind of the passing of the torch.
The godfather of this award. Yes.
Actually, Arcidi was the first kind of multi-time winner, but
oh my God!
All right, time for our final overall grade. Nick, we grade this out of 10. I should say. You can use half stars. I kind of slipped up and gave my grade, so I'll go ahead and set it. I went 9 out of 10, Scott. I think this is after 3. I gave a 9.5 to 3. So this is my second highest show, I believe, to date that I've graded. I think it's about as perfect an hour of television as you're going to get with the WWF or any wrestling, really. The booking was perfect. The storytelling was perfect. The pacing was great. I can't go 10 out of 10 because 10 out of 10 to me has to be an all-time perfect show, and this is a little bit short. But I think it's about as close as you can get. So I went 9 out of 10 for this bad boy. What did you have, Nick?
I'll go the same. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's almost perfect. If Honky and Macho had been just a little bit better and maybe had, a decent finish to that, you probably could have made an argument for a 10 out of 10, but hard to find too much to pick apart about the whole last 40 minutes of the show, essentially, with the whole Hogan Andre angle. Absolutely fantastic, iconic, entirely worthy of its place in wrestling history.
Agreed. Scott?
Well, I'm going to take your philosophy, JR, because I gave WrestleMania 3 a perfect 10, so I'm going to give this a 9.5. It's ridiculous. 33 million, 15.2 share, the most iconic broadcast wrestling program ever, and still is to this day. And the run is over. And the credits, you're almost unfulfilled. It was just perfect storytelling. 9.5.
All right, there you go. The main event is wrapped up and in the books. Great show as always, guys. Nick, it was great to have you here for your debut. Scott will be back next week is the plan to cover the February 88 MSG House Show. We'll see who will be joining us that evening. We'll talk about that this week. And then the week after that, we'll be looking at the March 88 Saturday Night event. So,
yes,
some good stuff to come as we fill out May. What else we got going on? So what do you got, Scott? Main event this week?
Yes, main event will be this week, and we will recap last night's Backlash pay-per-view and our next installment of our TNA Classic pay-per-view show recap. So we'll have that this week. That'll come later in the week.
All right, I got some shiznit going on. Of course, I think I would have plugged maybe last week the new Jeff Lawrence Wrestling, where we talked about the iconic Mega Powers beer pong tournament story and some other dramatics going on in Jeff's life. I also want to plug, of course, the Wrestling Warzone podcast, looking back at the Monday Night Wars. That's with myself and Chad Campbell. We have 3 episodes in the books. We're looking to do In Your House 3, hopefully this week, for episode 4. We have set up a Facebook page, so if you're a fan of the show and you want updates, but we're also doing questions of the day. We're doing polls. We're making it pretty interactive. We want your feedback to read on air. So you can follow our Facebook page as well. If you just look up Wrestling Warzone, it should come up there. It's pretty easy to find, or you can find it linked on any of the Place to Be Nation social media pages as well. So give us a like over there, follow us with what's going on, take part in the discussion, and check out the show. Appreciate the feedback we've gotten so far. I've enjoyed it, both the show and the feedback. So, Nick, you're a fan of that show, right? A rare one?
Yeah, Wrestling Warzone. I've listened to all 3 episodes thus far, and other than the unnecessary shots at 1995 WCW Hulk Hogan, I think everything's going pretty well so far. I've enjoyed it. It's been a good listen.
All right, there you go. And Nicholas, you have some stuff going on as well, right?
Yeah, of course. Greg Phillips and myself, we are the Hard Traveling Fanboys, and we currently are the longest running weekly episodic comic book podcast in all of Place to Be Nation. You can catch us over on the Place to Be Nation Pop feed. We just hit, I think, episode 107. We'll have 108 later this week. And then also over on the Pop feed as well, myself, Tim Capel, Todd Weber, and Russell Sellers came together for the first episode of the Marvel Age podcast that should be out pretty much any day now. That's going to be a year-by-year look at the publishing history of Marvel Comics, starting all the way back in November of 1961 with the release of Fantastic Four #1. So if you're into comics, our first episode, we cover the last 2 months of 1961 and all of 1962 from a Marvel perspective. And the plan as of right now is to cover a year per episode going forward.
That's pretty awesome.
With the opportunity to do stretch years over multiple episodes as the stories warrant it.
All right.
Wow.
Sure, check that out.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no doubt. Big comics nerds like us are into that.
Yeah, we still got to get you on for that Industrial Age Thor podcast you said you wanted to do.
I'm pretty fired up about it. I'm not going to lie. Names of notebooks just sitting on my desk. Ready to dig in. All right.
But
yeah,
we have I just wanted to say real quick, we have our Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page. So if anybody wants to read along with us as we go through Marvel Age, we can get the reading list to you. We're not doing everything in a given year, just for the purposes of time, but we've got probably about usually 10 to 15 issues a year, at least from the early standpoint that we're covering. So if anybody is into comics and wants to read along with us, just reach out to us there via that Facebook page, and we'll get the necessary information into your hands.
All right, and also should mention The Watchmen, I guess, right? The part 2.
Oh my God, yeah, part 2 of Place to Be Nation Pop Comic Book Theater, Watchmen, desecrating the most iconic graphic novel of all time by putting our own unique spins on it. I don't really know what to call it other than a clusterfuck of epic proportions that must be heard to be believed. So if you like comics and you like pro wrestling and you like the two intermingling together in a series of bizarre in-jokes, then this is the audio adaptation for you.
If you want to hear some hidden VKM gems, they're in there. You're not going to hear them here. Only in the Pop feed. Watch.
Wouldn't it be RKM perhaps?
Yeah. Spoilers. So everyone tune in.
Sorry.
Everyone tune in. Well worth checking out. Of course, Todd does a great job editing that thing too. So a lot of fun there. If you enjoy our Christmas plays, it's worth checking that out too. Subscribe to the Pop feed. You can hear all that, plus much more, of course. And you heard that as well on our break earlier. So, all right. I think that'll about do it. So that's Nick. That's Scott. I'm Justin. We're out. We'll talk to you next week. Everyone take care.